Assalamu alaikum. Sorry to interrupt your viewing of After Maghrib. We have some really exciting news for you, and that is that this episode is sponsored by Thaqalain Media. We are very grateful and really honored to be joined by Thaqalain, partnering with After Maghrib, and it's an honor also to be featured on the Thaqalain app where you can watch After Maghrib. And that is one of the many reasons why, brothers and sisters, you need to download the Thaqalain app. And you'll see here there is so much to choose from articles, publications, slideshows, different series. You can see here, there we are, After Maghrib, and so much more. Blogs, of course, calendars, guides, and much more. We all owe a lot to Thaqalain, and they've been doing an incredible work serving the Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam over many years. I've personally benefited from it. I know we have as a podcast, and if you feel the same way as me, then we encourage you to support Thaqalain Media for what they're doing is really servicing the community and inshallah helping us prepare for the awaited Savior Imam al-Mahdi Ajallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif. So make sure you download the Thaqalain app, make sure you support Thaqalain in the work they're doing, and now back to the episode.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the After Maghrib podcast, the late night buzz where our weekly conversations continue week in, week out, releasing every Thursday. And if you haven't subscribed by now, I'm going to echo Ahmed's words, my co-host, smash that subscribe button. If you've been listening to After Maghrib from the very beginning, there is a reason we're having these weekly conversations. Ahmed, feel free to disagree with me, but I know we align here is that we want to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, understand the sunnah of Rasulullah Muhammad, understand the teachings of the Ahlulbayt alayhi salam. So sometimes we enter discussions where some may say, why are we talking about this? But genuinely and ultimately, we want to truly understand what God wants from us. Now, before I mention what we will discuss about today, I do want to say we are joined by the one and only, not a special guest. Actually, he is special, but he's not a guest. He's a member of the After Maghrib family, and you know him if you tune in Fridays and you watch Jumah Nights. Brother Mohamed Ali. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa salam.
Assalamu alaikum.
How you doing?
Alhamdulillah, man. Doing good. Obviously, third time on. Inshallah.
That's how on the podcast, bro.
Yeah.
Third time on, third time lucky.
What's that meant to be? Inshallah. How you doing? Ziyad Qabul, bro, just came back.
Yeah, man, thank you.
How's your
Alhamdulillah, it was amazing. Really, like, spiritual experience. Really enjoyed it. Inshallah, like, take me back, honestly.
For real.
Yeah, inshallah. Karbala next time, inshallah.
Inshallah.
And yeah, inshallah, we can go together.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Maybe we have something planned in the future, who knows?
God knows.
Inshallah. Say, what are we talking about today?
Well, before I say what we're talking about today, how are you?
Alhamdulillah. I'm okay, bro. I was going to say, no salam for me.
That's what I want to come to.
90 episodes. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Oh,
Honestly. Do you know what that means?
Crazy.
That means that you are the like immediate replacement for me.
brother. Al-jar thumma ad-dar.
Whoa. I thought we were all the same team. No, fair enough, bro. Fair enough.
To be fair, I said salam when we walked in, innit? Before the podcast.
Jumah Nights is like the neighbor podcast, to be fair.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Sister podcast.
I'm not getting involved.
get
Not the sisters podcast. Said, what are we talking about? Tell me.
Today we want to, well, you're going to tell me better, but from what I understand, before I even mention the topic, because I don't even know what we will end up titling this, we live in a world where governments, be it good or evil, bad or ugly, are ruling, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim. And we are confused. Genuinely, I'm confused. Right. And we see Muslim leaders, Muslim rulers, whether we look at Gulf countries, wherever you look right now, given the current situation that the world faces, we can't differentiate between haqq, batil, right and wrong. So what we want to discuss here today is Islamic governments. Do we need them? What are the requirements of them? You know, why are they important? Can we live in a non-Muslim government country? Do we have to go live in an Islamic country? I think that's where I want to see the conversation going. But you tell me.
Yeah, I mean, look, in light of our continuing themes of gaining ilm and understanding the world around us, it's an important conversation to have. So it goes without saying that the world we live in, like you said, is very diverse, very politicized and globalized. So at this juncture in the world we live in, we have an ongoing genocide, which we've seen for the last 8 months. We have political upheaval in the Western states, whether it's the US or the UK, the independent movement in the UK, the rise of the independent narrative, the non-mainstream media narrative happening in North America, and all of these things leave and kind of bring the question forth as to what is the future for Muslims who are Western diaspora Muslims. Okay, so it's important to have this conversation in light of what our history in Islam teaches us. Of course, the governance methods of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Aimah alayhi salam, and obviously looking forth to the Imam al-Mahdi ajalla ta'ala Fajr Sharif. So of course, it goes without saying, guys, we are not like political analysts, we're not shuyukh, we're not scholars, we're not diplomats, we are amateurs, or at least I speak for myself, an amateur when it comes to this kind of conversation, but really someone who's engaged in it and wants to learn more, and inshallah we can bring this conversation to you so you can also do the research and the learning with us as well. There's probably a good place to start, in my opinion, which is why we feel there's a need to talk about governance, especially when we are from the school of the Ahlulbayt alayhim salam. Okay, we talk about, there's a hadith from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam where he says that the Umayyads and the Abbasids, this is in Al-Khisal, where he says that Umayyads and the Abbasids, they ruled with an iron fist, basically. Whereas we, the school of the Ahlul Bayt, our governance methods are with compassion and love and a gentle demeanor. Why is it important to have this conversation today? Mo?
So I think with Islamic governance and governance in general, I think there's been a long history of development with regards to what is governance, what is the solution to people's problems or social issues at any given time. And that in itself has changed. So we see, for example, the Khilafah of Amir al-Mu'mineen in the mainstream understanding, like the Khilafah of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And if you draw parallels, it's possible that the government of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam will not be exactly the same as the government of Imam Ali, even though both of them are infallible governments, right? So I think the most important thing with regards to governance is that it's definitely needed, and it's just how to govern a society, and that is something that, that need has existed from the beginning of time. When you have a group of people larger than 10, 15, 20, there always needs to be a leader amongst them and a system in order to govern them. And obviously, as followers of the Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, as Muslims, we believe that we should have the solution, we should have the answer from the Imams and from the Quran. Obviously, the Quran says that it is a book that is explanatory of all things, tibyanan li kulli shay. And governance is just a basic kind of necessity in every kind of society. So at the very least, we have to believe that this is where we can find the answer in the Quran and obviously the hadith of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, which is something that scholars and Muslim thinkers have been trying to get to for years, with that science developing and changing over many centuries. So I think it would be interesting to just discuss all of that development and how it's changed. And
the lack of governance leads to chaos and anarchy and complete disorder, and every rule, every fabric of society will lack that order. The chaos would ensue would be a result of like a lack of law.
And there's a hadith as well, actually, I wanted to quote from Imam Radhawi alayhi salam. He says, and we see that there is not a single group from all of the groups of the world, or a nation from any of the nations that lived and remained, except with choosing a maintainer and a leader for themselves to sort out their matters in the dunya and in the deen. And because that individual would be able to sort out all the social affairs, like the financial issues, so economically, socially, to have some sort of law and order. And this is something that's a natural thing that we don't necessarily need a hadith for, but just rationally we can understand that every kind of society requires some sort of leadership.
What's interesting, before you just mentioned this hadith by Imam Radhawi alayhi salam, you mentioned that when Imam al-Mahdi ajalla ta'ala Fajr Sharif comes, he will govern differently than Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali alayhi salam. I don't know too much on this, but I remember hearing a lecture, just can't remember by whom, and he said a point on the minbar where he was like, Imam Ali, when he was ruling, if you wanted to implement, for example, the Islamic penal code, or if you wanted to, you know, for example, implement any Islamic law, he couldn't until the person actually committed something.
Right.
Whereas when Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam comes, he doesn't rule by this, because he already knows what that person is going to do. So he takes the action before the individual actually.
I've seen this like spoken about. They speak about it as Hukum al-Dawood. Right,
I'm not sure the name,
idea that before it having happened, because he's aware of it, then he can take a hukum on it before it even happens.
That's crazy.
And that's
a good place to start maybe this conversation is talking about the hukuma of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, the concept of governance in an Islamic lens is obviously introduced at the time of revelation. Okay, so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduces the Holy Prophet as Khatam Nabi'een, and he introduces him as the chosen messenger, the infallible messenger of God's law, God's word on earth, he is then put forward as a divine representation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, what I find interesting is the Holy Prophet Muhammad, he acts in every single facet of governance. The legislative, the judicial, and of course the executive. He's not someone who just expounds articles of faith and theorizes spirituality. Rather, he executes law and he implements law as an executor. And that's really interesting to note, because for the first time in really probably in Arab history, you had a like royal figure or a non-tyrannical figure who was executing law from a perspective of divine knowledge, which is very interesting. Now, with Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he executed law, he administered everything, like you said. So, for example, whether it's assigning judges, for example, or sitting in the judiciary himself, whether it's I don't know, dispensing emissaries to foreign states, whether it's acting as a commander-in-chief and working militarily, whether it's working on the ground and engaging with people face to face with their social issues and all of that stuff, he would then implement that. And at the time of his death, there was a reason why no one came out and said, we don't need a government. No, everyone agreed that the Islamic government system that he had built was perfect and it was working. The only argument was then who takes over, because they saw this to be something valuable and they saw it to be something which everyone would want to take part in, to the point where then there was, of course, a dispute which now leads until today. And only that seat, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned, you know, there's so many verses in the Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, I'm not going to go through them, and everyone at home inshallah can do this, but there's so many verses in the Holy Quran. Surah Ibrahim verse number 52, Surah Yunus verse number 2, Surah Al-Ahzab verse number 40, Surah Yasin verse number 70. All of these different verses talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's divine knowledge and wisdom when it comes to appointing Rasulullah Muhammad as the messenger. Just one thing which I find very interesting is when in Surah Al-Ahzab, Allah says that Muhammad is not the father of any of your sons. Rather, he is the messenger of Allah and the seal of the Prophet's Khatam Nabi'een, and Allah has perfect knowledge over all things. Imagine the obedience you have to your father, right? More than that, Rasulullah is, of course, the chosen representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth. So the obedience to Rasulullah from a law and order perspective is divinely appointed, rather than just something which is a social responsibility or a moral obligation, if that makes sense. So I think that's a good place to start, maybe talking about the Holy Prophet and the Ayyam alayhi salam. Of course, we'll get on to Amir al-Mu'mineen as well. What do you think?
I wouldn't know what to add to there, to be honest.
How do you think that Rasulullah governs society?
So I think one of the most important things that we see in the leadership of Rasulullah is the fairness and the adala, right? That we see lost in the leaderships that come after. So for example, when we look at the time of Rasulullah, there's functions, economic functions, like the Baytul Mal, right? The Baytul Mal at the time of Rasulullah is distributed fairly, right? If you're a slave and you've just been freed, and you're a master of 10 slaves, you're going to be treated the same as a slave as a Muslim, right? So you see that at the time of Rasulullah. And then in the time of the Khulafa, so the second Khalifa, for example, you see a level of discrimination seeping into the Islamic leadership. So, for example, the Persians that would come to the second Khalifa with regards to their economic issues or anything like that would be treated significantly worse than the Arabs that were there, right?
Yeah.
Then you have the situation of the third caliph, which became very famous, that it even led to his death. Basically, a lot of people began to hate him because of his favoritism. Yeah. And his his issues with how he distributed the money of the wealth of the Muslims, right? And then you see that Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he comes back, he brings back the usul and the principles of Rasulullah in making it fair again. And what is really interesting is that, you know, when we think of people like Talha and Zubair, for example, Talha and Zubair, they had issues, of course, with Imam Ali ideologically, but another big issue that they had was with the money. They knew that now our guy is gone, right? Now we're going to go back to the time of Rasulullah and we're not going to get any kind of favoritism, right? So that was something that was such a small, like, you know, one part of the Khilafah, one part of the leadership, but was so significant in those like different Khilafas.
How would that all relate to us today?
Well, it's
And this discussion.
No, like Mohammed, you mentioned earlier that there needs to be a leader or someone who acts in the position of authority in any social environment. You could be a manager in a business, you could be a father in the house, whatever it might be.
You need a leader.
There needs to be an understanding of justice in every social setting, right? Any corporate setting, any religious environment that you're in, there needs to be an authority, and with authority comes conditions. So you talk about Holy Salah. Right? Do we not know, of course, that there are conditions that come with leading Salat al-Jama'ah, as an example, on a very microscopic scale. But when we talk about governance at large, you know, we're living in a day and age where now in the UK we have over 10,000 food banks. 25 years ago, without getting too political, we didn't have any food banks in the UK. We had one, I believe, in the whole of the country. But now, of course, we've been royally done in by the current government in the UK, to the point where now we're in a recession. Okay, we have high child poverty and so on. So when we talk about Amir al-Mu'mineen, like you mentioned, Kofi Annan in the UN, why did he reference Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam when he talked about government? It's because Amir al-Mu'mineen had a standard which eradicated poverty. And we talk about welfare states. In the UK, we pride ourselves on being a welfare state, NHS and benefits and so on and so forth. Imam Ali alayhi salam, and of course Rasulullah, introduced the welfare state in a world where no one had welfare, right? There's so many things, and if you don't mind, I'll just rapid fire list a few things which I love about the way Amir al-Mu'mineen treated his government. Okay, the first thing he did was he made the marketplace ethical. He made it a fair trading environment. If you were a seller, he would tell people, don't overvalue your goods. And if you're a buyer, don't devalue or de-estimate the item you're buying. Be fair in the way you trade with people. And I use that in my business today, for example. When I quote a client, I bear in mind, am I ripping them off or not? For example, he introduced a fair levy on tax. He would tell his governors, when you're collecting tax, don't whip people. If they can't pay tax, tell them it's okay. You know, you're not allowed to use capital punishment when doing things like that. He would never allow a delay in distribution of wealth. Okay, so public assets, benefits to the disabled, for example, disability allowance on a monthly basis, divorcees and widows, if they had lost a breadwinner, he'd say we as the state would act as the breadwinner for the divorcee. He would allow fair and equal enjoyment of public goods so that everyone in this together can use and benefit from them. The main two things which I really appreciate, one you mentioned is nepotism. He allowed us to live, or not us, so he allowed the people at the time to live in a world of meritocracy where you earn the position you get. You don't get a position, or your sons or your kinship don't get special perks and privileges for being related to you from the same ashira as you or whatever. Rather, Imam Hassan Islam, of course, was the Minister of Finance in Imam Ali's government, but he got there through merit. The thing which I love the most, and you asked about how it applies to us, he was very frugal with public assets. What do I mean? So, of course, they would collect tax like jizya and khums and whatnot. The money that they would collect from tax in the treasury, they would buy, I don't know, let's say like a cart, to distribute bread or something, He would go to the extent where he would tell his governors, Imam Ali would tell his governors, if you are writing me a letter on paper that's owned by the treasury, make sure you sharpen your pencil and reduce the lines the lines between the sentences on the paper, and don't engage in verbosity. Like, don't write for the sake of writing. Don't say nonsense. Be quick with your words. Use as little paper as you can, so that I know in my heart that we are not guilty of wastage of aslaf. Like, even to such a degree, he was frugal and not stingy. There's a very careful point to make here. Not stingy, but rather he was conscious that this belongs to the people and not myself. We talked a few podcasts ago about the story of the candle, which we always talk about. Talha and Zubair, I believe, came to him and they said, we want to discuss a personal matter, and he had a candle lit, which was the property of the treasury. He unlit the candle, he took out another one and relit it. They said, why did you do that? He said, because the light was burning and I cannot use that candle when I'm discussing personal issues. Now talk to me. Now, so I know I'm rambling on a bit, but these are things that I think about when we talk about how it applies today. And then the world we live in is just filled with corruption, nepotism, favoritism. Like, there's just so many things. The lobbies and the pressure groups that we see today, who are actively participating in genocide, who are actively participating in like a lack of a moral standing in society when governing what is meant to be a civilized Western democracy, completely failing. And there's a need for the reintroduction of moral consciousness.
100%. I think it's interesting as well that despite there being a meritocracy, it was a situation and a system in which poverty didn't exist.
100%.
That there's a narration, I believe it's from Abu Dhar, where it says that Imam Ali alayhi salam, he comes out into the market and he saw a beggar, and he was in shock. Imam Ali was in shock. He's like, why is there a beggar in my khilafah? Like, that at that time, that was shocking to see somebody actually on the street begging, because that's how fairly the Baytul Mal was distributed. So the wealthy were giving their share of the tax, and obviously that makes up for at least the basic necessities of everybody, such that they shouldn't be begging. Like, at that point in time, people did not see generally people begging in the street. Imam Ali sorted that person out, and that was it. Like, that was the level that society has reached to.
Ajib. It makes me think, like, now we live in a world where we have how many Islamic countries? How many Islamic countries?
God knows, dozen.
And they don't, I don't think any of them have a welfare system in place. The most basic thing,
like,
where you look after, like you said, the widows, the orphans, and we don't wish this on anyone, let alone. But if you're saying you are leading an Islamic government, I don't want to use any countries as examples right now.
You could use all of them.
Okay, let's use all of them. Then. What are you doing? If you're claiming to be, ruling by the Book of Allah, some of them do claim. Like, their constitutions are according to the Quran and Sunnah of Rasulullah Muhammad. What are you doing? So, I don't know.
Even the identities of these.
I think only Imam Mahdi can sort this.
You're a Muslim.
You have to be a ma'soom to eradicate poverty.
You're a Muslim, you're from a specific ethnicity. You go to a Muslim country, most of them won't accept you as a citizen of that country. There's these nationalistic ideals as well that take over with regards to Islam. Like, if you go to a specific country, you could live there 50 years, you could have children there, you could marry someone there, you could do everything, you live there, and they would not accept you as a citizen of that country. So, this like nationalism and
tribalism.
Exactly. Moved away from the Islamic identity into a nationalistic identity. And with time, it's just getting worse. Everywhere you go, for example, even like, let's say Middle East. In the Middle East, everywhere you go, that identity of their country, of their nation is just becoming stronger with time. It's not getting like less. It's not like they're moving away from that and now saying, okay, let's adopt a more Islamic identity. Even those that adopt a Islamic identity, it's all very surface level. That this is appearance. Like, this is just, we're an Islamic country. We put Quran on as decoration when you come into the country, or it's very performative.
Oh, you said it's decoration.
It's decoration. Exactly.
I want to come back to something you mentioned, and you're right. I completely agree. Tribalism is rampant, and that's one of the diseases, of course. But something you mentioned about only a ma'soom can eradicate poverty. I think you're right from a theoretical perspective. Like, a ma'soom can bring us the practical and timeless theories that we can implement, because Amir al-Mu'mineen had his government, right? And he had people in ministership, and he had people, of course, who later went on to betray him even, or betray the other imams, later imams, but to the point where, like you mentioned Baytul Mal earlier, like Baytul Mal as a concept is there because it can work, it can flourish even. Amir al-Mu'mineen says that if I see a person in destitution, I know it's because a rich person has denied him his share. You know, there should be no poverty. If we talk about khums as an example, it's more than just, oh, this money for a poor Sayyid and this money for the work of the Imam. It's much more than that, right? So if forget even on a global level, but even in the Islamic world, if all Muslims gave 20% of their annual disposable income,
25 is a bit too much.
25 is too much, bro. 20% of the annual, yeah, I'm thinking about too much sadaqah and zakat and madrashah. No, but if you think about 1/5 of your annual disposable savings, you'd be able to do much more than just use some money to build a mosque or use some money to support a charity. You know, we'd then be able to flourish in a world where poor people can, well, at least if the government in order is like acting properly and there's allocation of funds and Baytul Mal is effective, then you have a much more flourishing welfare state.
I think though, obviously we have khums right now, and obviously it doesn't seem to have completely solved the issue.
Yeah, but everything comes back to...
Shall I tell you why? The Masoom. Go on.
But I was going to say everything comes back to the people, right? So who's administering those funds and allocating those funds? And also, let's be real. Do we genuinely believe that every believing Shia or is like doing their khums?
I mean,
do you know what I'm saying?
The thing is, with the amount of Shia, the ones that are paying it, to be fair, it should be enough, I reckon.
Yeah, it's not a conversation for
yeah,
us to have. We leave that to the experts.
Well, you know, someone once said, I was doing once, I was on a live charity campaign.
Yeah.
And someone mentioned, like, if just the Muslims, like there's over 1 billion, if they just paid their fair share in zakat, forget non-Muslims, just every Muslim paid their zakat on time, every time, correctly, with no cheating, no hiding money, no finding loopholes to get away from paying what's due.
Yeah.
Bro, there will be no poverty in this world.
Of course, yeah, no, you're right.
So we're to blame. As much as we want to complain, leaders are not doing enough and, people are running countries corruptly and things like this. No, I think everyone plays a role.
Bro, it's forget even just in Islam. You talk about annual food wastage on a daily basis. If the amount of food wasted in one day was saved, it could eradicate homeless, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Starvation for a year, right? On like on a global level. Like, so there's so many things like like you said, on like a introspective level we can look at and we can say, yeah, I need to take this away and learn from it. What about, now let's talk about types of government. I think this is interesting and I think it's an important conversation to have because we're getting into it, and if you live in the UK or the US, you'll know that we are heading towards elections. So there's a general election coming up in the UK. Of course, there's a presidential elections coming up in the US later this year. We are talking about government.
And there's Saqifa that happened many years ago.
And there's Saqifa that happened many years ago as well. When we talk about types of government, we live in a liberal democracy. Liberal democracy, many may argue that it may not work, whether you're in a first past the post system like we are here in the UK or not, okay? But monarchy and royalty is something which is just deplorable by Islamic standards, okay? Now, we see this in so many examples throughout history, whether we're talking about Fir'aun, whether we're talking about Roman emperors, whether we're talking about kings, and on every level it's considered to be taghut, right? Like to the point where even in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, where you see Fir'aun, he says, Ana rabbukum al-a'la. Yeah, and Allah says in the Holy Quran, I'll get the verse up, I have it somewhere, just bear with me. Where is it? Surah Al-Qasas, verse number 4. Fir'aun arrogantly elevated himself in the land and divided its people into subservient groups, of which he persecuted, slaughtering their sons and keeping their women. Truly he is one of the corruptors. And that concept of corruption on earth is very important. I'm not going to come back to your first podcast where you talked about causing corruption on the earth if you don't give your sons to, or your daughters to. Do you remember that hadith?
Yeah, the marriage.
Because if you don't give your daughters to a guy with deen and akhlaq, he's causing corruption on the earth. Not like Fir'aun.
Everything comes back to marriage, by the way. But I don't want to take the conversation.
Ali was.
I don't want to take that conversation.
Now, but let's talk about this, okay? So monarchy, right? So from the concept of like shirk, and the
Henry
concept of taghut. Sorry?
Henry VIII. No, I'm just thinking of
yeah, even
the kings
that,
of England and stuff.
Yeah, like, do you think that that system is a broken system for Muslims?
Of course, because we see it here today. And we're living proof, and they're living proof, and we see how they rule and how they treat their citizens, their subjects, if they're the kings and majesties of today. But before I get into this, whole monarchy thing, I want to talk about, for example, the Western governments.
Yeah.
There's something I like about them, Ahmed.
Yeah. There's many things. Very nice.
Yes, they're not Islamic, but they have many Islamic principles and values that align with us. One of them being is the welfare state.
Yeah.
One of them being is human rights, although now we see it doesn't apply to everyone, but it applies for their citizens. And you're telling me, I can go to an Islamic country, and it goes back to your point. I can go to an Islamic country, I cannot be an Arab, and I don't have the same rights at work, residency, and everything else. But I can come here, you can be a white man, and I can be an Arab, and someone else can be, I don't know, he can be from a different part of the world,
right.
And they all have the same rights when it comes, for example, home ownership, when it comes to claiming welfare, the right to vote, having a say. You play a huge part in society. Yes, you're not a Muslim-run government, but it's sort of, you don't feel like there is racism from government level. You don't feel like you're losing out from government level.
Maybe some do.
No, now you do. Now it's apparent. Before it was hidden. But sometimes I can go to an Islamic country. I can't even practice my beliefs. I can do it here. So I would rather be in a state.
Freedom of religious belief.
I'd rather be living in a country that allows me to practice my religion freely than go to an Islamic country that I can't even practice my religion, let alone my Shia faith freely.
I agree. Of course, there are blurred lines on some issues.
That's why I say it's impossible. You need the Ma'soom to rule. You can't. I don't know. You tell me, Muhammad Ali.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. Obviously, I understand like what you're saying, and it's true that there is a lot of freedoms here that we enjoy.
Look,
and
if they claim to be ruling in the name of Islam, I'll say it oppositely.
I completely
But they
understand.
don't.
The
problem is the other side does.
I think as well, as people that grow up in the West, there is a...
I'm not a British Shia, by the way. Yeah, go on.
Okay, so when we're like growing up in the West, I think there is an inkling of when you look at the media and we see with regards to Islamic countries and they talk about Sharia law and to be honest, there always will be an inkling of us being scared to live in a Muslim like country when we think about how we've been conditioned.
Are you scared living in the UK right now?
Of course.
Why?
Oh, that's a
whole nother
conversation.
Bro, I don't think this is a conversation about like on a personal level.
I'm scared to live in Saudi, for example.
Yeah, but that would in many ways that might be on a personal level.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Yeah, I think this inkling,
maybe I've understood it wrong.
The thing is, unfortunately, of course, we can all agree that the Muslim countries that do exist, or the generic Muslim countries that exist, we can agree that they're not ruling completely by Islam, right? The generic mainstream Muslim countries. And the thing is that with growing up in the West, there is that effect of media on us that even if we were to think about certain hudud, for example, in Islam, right?
Yeah.
There's certain things are in the Quran, right? Hudud. If someone steals, this is the punishment. If someone does this is the punishment. You can't say, as someone that's grown up in the West, that doesn't make you even the tiniest bit of uncomfortable. If you were to see someone, for example, receiving the punishment for stealing, there would be a part of you that would be like, is this really it? And I think that there's a lot of conditioning with regards to how we view Islamic governance because of how we've grown up seeing Muslim governments run. Yeah, that's one aspect, and also because of conditioning of the media. But I just wanted to come to an ayah of the Quran as well with regards to how Allah wants hukum to be done, right? And he mentions it in here we have Surah Al-Ma'idah, right? We have a verse number 44. Allah says with regards to the religions that came even before Islam. Yeah, so he says, Inna anzalna, after the basmala, he says, Inna anzalna tawrata fiha hudan wa nur, yahkumu biha an-nabiyuna alladhina aslamu lilladhina hadu wal rabbaniyuna wal ahbaru. Yeah, so he says that we've sent down the Torah, yeah, in it there's guidance and light. And the prophets, they do hukum by it, they judge by it, they rule by it, right? And it says, wal rabbaniyuna wal ahbar. The people that were the scholars from them, yeah, so the priests from them or the rabbis from them, those who understood the scripture to the highest extent, were those who were responsible for ruling by it. So we can see that, like, and it's a recurring theme across the like Quran and the riwayat, that this is the way the authority works, that it's Allah's authority in the Quran, it's the prophets, it's the imams, and then it's the scholars, right? And those are, the reason for that is because they're the ones that understand the religion the best and are able to apply it in the best way in any given situation. So like I said, of course, if Imam Ali's government is not necessarily going to be exactly the same as how Imam Sahib Zaman rules, in that period of time where we have the occultation, we have the ghaiba, there has to be an answer, there has to be a system that is given to you by Allah, that those who are most understanding of his religion, of the Quran, of the Ahlulbayt, have a responsibility to then actually bring into existence and actually, you know, make it, actualize it.
But do you mean even on a non-governmental level?
Yeah,
what I mean,
of course.
This is what I feel as well, because I think it's forgive me saying, but I think for those who say like we can't do anything till the Imam comes, I feel like that's a bit of a naive approach, because active intidhar is the preparation
100%.
and setting the foundation, setting the groundworks from now. Even if it's just educating oneself, like we said earlier on the methodology of the Imam salam when it came to dealing with people. And we've seen in the lives of the Imam different political environments for the different Imams. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam was in between a transition period between the two ruling dynasties of the time, the Umayyads and the Abbasis. We've seen Imams under house arrest. We've seen Imams who were sitting in government or who were the Khulafa themselves. And in my opinion, I think those are examples for us to be able to understand how Islam prevailed, or how Shi'ism prevailed at a time of environment X or environment Y, if that makes sense. You know, and at least on a foundational level, we should educate ourselves and be able to understand what are the morals that the Imam is looking for. Because there's another there's another hadith where Imam Ali alayhi salam, where he tells his governors, look for the people, if you've got a vacant position, look for the people, and forgive, I heard the Arabic, or I read it earlier, and I'm not going to even like begin to attempt it, but he says, look for the people from good homes, from credible families and with track records. Don't look for the people who have just got a fancy CV, basically, in you know, in a nutshell. He's basically saying that you want people who are qualified and who earn the position based on credibility, rather than those who seem to be like putting themselves forward because they want the name and fame.
Even the fact that Imam Ali had governors at all. Because if you think about it, it's not in today's age where you have the internet, where you have instant access to the governor, right? The governor's gone off into wherever he's gone off into, and he rules, right? Wherever his area is, he's sorting it out. So someone like Malik al-Ashtar, for example, right? Sent as a wali, right? Even though he's not ma'soom, Imam Ali considers him as suitable to be able to run a specific area, right? And
but
you
it was
see
the
this,
Ma'soom that chose Malik al-Ashtar.
yeah, that's true. But like, even when we look at, for example, the idea of a faqih in general, right? We spoke about Rabbaniyun and Ahbar, right? These people that are best suited to understand the Quran and the Hadith, when the Ahlulbayt speak about the fuqaha in general, the conditions they set for the faqih are immense, right? For example, there's a hadith, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, I think it's in Rijal Kashi, but I don't think I marked it. He says, لا نعد فقيه من لا نعد من الفقهاء فقيها حتى يكون محدثا, right? We don't consider a faqih from the fuqaha to be a proper jurist, a proper scholar, until he is divinely inspired, spoken to, muhaddathan. Like muhaddath in like the narrations is, generally speaking, it's like when an angel's speaking to him. And the companion's confused. He says, "Oh, yakunu al-mu'minu muhaddathan? Is a normal believer able to ever be divinely inspired?" And the Imam says, "Yakunu mufahaman wal mufahamu muhaddath." He says that he'll be made to understand, he'll be given understanding, divine understanding from the Imam through unseen ways, right? So that kind of condition, those conditions that the Imam set for that faqih. Now, whether that exists or not is a different conversation. Do we have fuqaha at that level? Do that meet those conditions, right? That unseen guidance from the Imam or from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. whether we have it or not is a different discussion, but the Imams, that's how they set their precedent. This is the kind of faqih that the Quran is speaking about when it says Rabbaniyun wal Ahbar, right? It's speaking about the Jews and the Christians, the priests and the rabbis, but those from the fuqaha that are actually really understanding of the Quran and Ahlulbayt and able to apply it in any given period of time. That is possible, and we see that at the time of the Yamani. Why is the Yamani obligatory to follow? Yeah, the Imam says, he says, وَلَا يُحِلُّ لِمُسْلِمٍ أَنْ يَلْتَوِي عَلَيْهِ. It's not allowed for a Muslim to go against him. فَمَنْ فَعَلَ ذَلِكَ فَهُوَ مِنْ أَهْلِ النَّارِ. Whoever does that goes against what Yamani said, and Yamani is not ma'soom, right? But whoever goes against what he says is from the people of the hellfire. He's made it obligatory for you to follow the Yamani, even though he's coming before Imam al-Mahdi, even if it's not a government, but it is a movement, a significant movement where everybody kind of has to listen to. And that's what the Imam has said. And the Yamani, although he is chosen by the Imam, the Yamani is a title. At the end of the day, there's going to be a guy that comes and he's got a movement. He's got the signs of the Yamani. And he's going to say, I'm the Yamani, follow me. And we will not have an Imam to tell us, yes, that's the Yamani. But we will have to recognize him and follow him, and it's wajib on us to follow him.
Which is why I think the knowledge of Quran and Hadith especially is so important, because then we won't have the tools, the equipment to be able to recognize the Yamani, as an example.
Exactly, yeah.
Let alone recognize the Holy Imam when he arrives and when he returns. And let alone be able to be part of the Ansar of the Holy Imam. Like there's a hierarchical like process for us to follow. Bro, we live in a country where people don't even know what the major parties are to vote for. How are we going to be able to say, yeah, I understand, I'm able to be part of the Imams? Bro, you don't know how the world works now.
Shouldn't this be for our fuqaha?
No, of course not. Of course not. No, why? The fuqaha have their role, and of course we discussed this last week. This is my opinion, of course. The fuqaha have their role. The marja'iyya as an institution has its role. Of course, like Muhammad Ali said as well, that there's the absolutely incredible conditions that are set for the Maraja to sit in office per se, and to get to that level itself takes decades of scholarship. But for the everyday community member, for the mu'mineen, we are participants. We make up the meat of the ummah. We are the organs of the ummah, and to the point where we are the workers and we're the laborers of the ummah. So when the Imam arrives, or even in preparation for the Holy Imam, we are the ones who are meant to be doing the work that the Imam wants us to do. Amir al-Mu'mineen carried sacks of food on his back to the Aitam. We should be doing that ourselves, because we know what he did, right? So we know the way he acted, the way he dealt with trade and agriculture, crafts, the way he dealt with foreign relations, the way he dealt with interfaith. These are things that we've got the groundwork on, right? And we can be laymen. We might be in youth clubs or in universities or whatever it might be, but we're smart enough to understand that, because we now live in a globalized world. We have access to education. We have access to the internet. We can pick up hadith books like Muhammad's got and be able to see in clear black and white text the way governments were run, and not even that, the way they will be run. And of course we're lucky as well, because we live in a world now where we see different types of government. We see monarchy, we see liberal democracy, we see other democracies which are set up differently to the one we live in, for example. Some which are more imposing on a two-party system, some which allow like a public vote, or different kind of setups.
Yeah, but these are all like examples of democracies that are not in line with Islamic.
But my point being is that we've seen all the theories, all the isms have been promoted and put forward, right? The last example is the example of the Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam, right? And because of that, we're able to dictate that, look, there's nothing in the past has worked, right? Over the last 1400 years, nothing has been able to flourish. It either results in war or poverty or both. Do you see what I mean?
So how do we get Islamic government?
So
how do we get the correct Islamic government?
The thing is,
Pause. Sorry, I'm very, very sorry to interrupt your episode of After Maghrib. But, brothers and sisters, I have a very, very important announcement, and that is that this episode is sponsored by the brothers and sisters at Thaqalain Media. And Thaqalain Media, for those who don't know, is an incredible hub of knowledge and resources for us to benefit and expand our knowledge of Islam, the Quran, and the Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam. Brothers and sisters, if you have downloaded the Thaqalain app like I have, you'll be able to see everything from courses here, series from different shows, including, of course, After Maghrib, where you can see all of our podcasts as well as also other things like the calendar, the guide, and much more as well. So I implore you, brothers and sisters, to be a part of Thaqalain Media's project for growth and service to the community. So we all need to support Thaqalain on a monthly basis. You can do that by downloading the app and going to the support tab on the far right, and inshallah you will be not only supporting Thaqalain but supporting organizations like ours by doing so. So now back to the episode. Hope you enjoy.
There's a narration here, very interesting one from Kitab Sulaim, from Imam Ali alayhi salam.
Bismillah.
And he says, والواجب في حكم الله وحكم الإسلام على المسلمين بعدما يموت إمامهم أو يقتل, is that أن لا يعمل عملا ولا يحدث حدثا ولا يقدم يدا ولا رجلا ولا يبدأ بشيء قبل أن يختاروا لأنفسهم إماما عفيفا عالما ورعا عارفا بالقضاء والسنة. He says that the first thing that Muslims should do after the Imam dies, whether he's killed or he dies, he says, is that they don't say anything, they don't do anything, they don't move hands or feet, except before they choose an Imam for themselves, someone who is an alim, knowing of the religion, wara'an, arifan bil qada wa sunnah, someone who understands the qada and the sunnah. And the purpose of this is yajma'u amrahum, like he brings them upon one affair, right? Wa yahkumu bainahum wa ya'khudhu lil madhlumi min adh-dhalim haqquhu. He says that he takes the right of the madhlum, right, of the oppressed, from the person who oppressed him, wa yahfadhu atrafahum, and he protects their movements, and he gives them their fate, right, their spoils of war. وَيُقِيمُ حَجَّهُمْ, right? وَيُقِيمُ حَجَّهُمْ, right? Their pilgrimages, they're leading their prayers, and the sadaqat. All of these things are the function that the Imam says that the people need to choose. So when we talk about even democracy, right? Democracy, of course, when there's an Imam that Allah is choosing, right, there's no democracy. Allah chooses and that's it. And this narration even, it says, هذا أول ما ينبغي أن يفعلوه. This is the first thing they should do. أن يختاروا إماما يجمع أمرهم إن كانت الخيرة لهم. He says that they should choose an Imam that brings them upon one affair if the choice is for them. ويتابعوه ويطيعوه, and they should follow him and obey him. وإن كانت الخيرة إلى الله عز وجل وإلى رسوله فإن الله كفاهم النظر في ذلك والاختيار. He says that if Allah and the Rasul have already chosen, then that's it, right? They've left you without having to actually look through the people and choose somebody. But here they're saying that the Imam's not here. This is a solution for the ghaiba, right? This is saying Imam's not there, what do we do, right? And this is Amir al-Mu'mineen with foresight, of course, knowing that there's going to be a ghaiba, knowing that there's going to be a 12th Imam, and knowing that one day we are going to sit here and ask, what is the solution to this? And we're going to have the hadith of Amir al-Mu'mineen in him saying that we do need to establish governments, that as a fundamental step, because there are those that even say, like, why don't we just wait for the Imam, right? And there's a lot of people that hold that opinion, that they say when the Imam comes, he will just sort everything out, right? But the fact that the Imams actually put emphasis on, look, this is something that's necessary, you need to find a leader, choose the leader, find somebody that's an alim, has wara, has understanding of the qada and the sunnah, and bring him in, so that at the very least, we're not sitting idle. We're not sitting like without anything, because that, like, we can talk about a little bit about the history of the development in Shi'ism specifically, because Shi'ism hasn't always been a religion that has power, right? There's been a lot of times where we've just been oppressed, just no leadership, no governance specifically, right? And those times obviously were different to the times that we do have power, because then people come up with theories and people try their best to implement that which is best from the Quran and Sunnah. And like you said, many a time it has not worked.
And if I can just add really quickly, like, we've seen communist, capitalist, secular societies over centuries But finally, we're kind of at a point where, like you mentioned, Said, living in the West, we have some freedoms. We enjoy some freedoms, although it's very hard to earn and save money in these days. But even then, we can do the groundwork. Like, we can set up the institutions, you know, whether it's Hawza or whether it's schools, hospitals, whatever, housing, charity of forms, you know, we can invest in like the institutions which already exist and are doing great work. And we see on a very like microcosmic level our community institutions. Like, there are institutions in the UK or even globally who represent a certain community. Do you see what I mean? And who have some sort of a welfare system, for example, to represent their community of Shi'ism, right? Without naming names. But these institutions are microcosmic societies of Islamic governance, because they're able to then, for example, we talk about World Federation. Yeah, World Federation, who support and are the umbrella body of 150, 200,000 Khojas around the world. They will, you know, support those in poverty in the subcontinent from the Khoja community. They will build houses. They will sponsor students to go to Hausa. They will invest in the mosques. They will invest in the sports clubs. They will invest in disabilities and mental health awareness, and have a marriage counselling thing and have spouse selection things. And my point being is that we are fallibles, we are non-ma'asum, but we have the capability to be able to engage, invest, and grow like the existing institutions and put forward institutions if they don't already exist. When it comes to the selection of the Arif and the Alim and all of these things, bro, I'm not gonna lie, that's like like, it sounds, this is my opinion, like I don't know how that would work today. Do you know what I mean? Like, how does one choose the representative or the one who is an authority? Like, that's probably another conversation that probably I need to ask a scholar.
This is why I said early on, shouldn't this be done by our fuqaha? Because who are we, like, to say, for example, okay, he's suitable.
I think everything should be done under the guidance and maybe with the blessing of the fuqaha.
Of course, that's what the riwayat are saying, right? Yeah. They're speaking about fuqaha. There's a riwayat al-fuqaha qada, right? That the fuqaha are leaders of the society. Yeah, yeah. They are the people that will choose. Inni ja'altuhu alaykum hakima.
But isn't that what they're doing here now today, for example? Right. Like, you gave the examples of, for example, World Federation and the work that they do.
Yeah.
I know so much maraji and the offices that do similar work.
Yeah, yeah. But the point being is that these are like community members.
Well, the problem is they don't work together.
But I mean, that's another conversation in itself.
So how will you ever end up saying, okay, you could argue this person is suitable?
Because there are institutions that do things under the guardianship of the ulama, or who have ijazah from the manaja to collect khums, and then they use the khums, and the manaja will give khums allowance, and then they will use the khums to build a hospital, for argument's sake, in an area of need, or build a well in somewhere else. Do you know what I mean? But the point being is that those who have reached the level of marja'iyah and who are maraja in themselves, that they are then engaging with the community, and the community are doing things under the guidance of the scholars who know the religion. Like, these are, through natural evolution, the sufara of the Holy Imam, the 12th Imam. Do you know what I mean? Just through like natural evolution over 1,000+ years, we're now here today, where we have the Grand Manaja who allow us to operate in the way we function. And, you know, we're trying to work towards 12th.
But I think it's also important to recognize that even as our Grand Maraja, as the Grand Scholars, that over time, things have... They haven't always been able to reach a complete answer, and that's okay, right? Yeah. We look at, for example, if we look at the Shia governments in history, in general, right? We have, at the time of Sheikh al-Mufid, we have the Buwayhiyin, the Buyid Empire, right? Which is vaguely Shi'a. And at that time, you have Sheikh al-Mufid writing a few things about Islamic governance, the faqih, and this kind of stuff. Then you have Sharif al-Murtada in al-Makasib, a couple of lines for the faqih and his, like, you know, leadership over a community, and some lines of theory. Then for a few centuries, the Shia are not in power. So no one's really writing about Islamic governance. Like, it's an irrelevant topic for those few centuries. Then you kind of have like the Safavids, right? And the Safavids, you have Muhaqqiq al-Karaki, right? He comes and he basically establishes and builds upon the idea of the walaya of the fuqaha, the guardianship basically of the scholars, and he's building on that idea that has been brought up in early Islam, in Sheikh al-Mufid's time and that time. And then at that point, you see the scholars have some sort of like power in the government, right? You have like Al-Majlisi also like having quite significant kind of influence. And then you come to kind of the colonial world, right? And then at that point, it's like, you know, there's also the Ottomans that they have their Khilafah, and there's a lot of, obviously outside of the school of Ahlulbayt as well, there's a lot of, you would always see scholars in with the governments, and, you know, they would have their questionable ideas or whatever in relation to whatever government they were in. And then we have post-colonialization when now there are nation states, right? Nation states come into play, and now no one knows what it means to be an Islamic country.
Yeah, because truly there's no, I mean, there are, we talk about in terms of Shi'ism, the only Islamic country by constitution is Iran, right? Exactly. So for example, you have Shia dominated countries like Iraq as an example, but it's a secular state. Iraq is secular, right? There's no like, as far as I'm aware, no obligation for the head of state to be Shia, right? And that's completely fine. If you're an Iraqi politician, and like you said, you enjoy the same privileges as you do in the West. But if you're talking about in terms of Islamic governance and Shi'i constitutions, the only one which follows it is Iran, because like you mentioned, Sayyid Khomeini followed on from that Hukumat al-Islami, as we talked about for the podcast, where you get to the point of the guardianship of the jurist.
Yeah, so you see even in like the 1920s or earlier than that as well, you have Mirza Shirazi getting involved with his tobacco fatwa, for example, getting involved in politics. And following the break of the Ottoman Empire, you have all these nation states, and a lot of thinkers come into the play, right? Yeah. As to what should we do. You have, for example, thinkers like Hassan al-Banna, Sayyid Qutb, right? From the Muslim Brotherhood. Yeah. And they have their thinkers thinking about how to like form a Islamic government in the world that we live in at the time, and they have ideas of shura. And similarly, we have in our kind of scholarship, we have Sayyid Burjardi, you have Shahid Baqir Sadr later on as well. You have then you have obviously Sayyid al-Khomeini coming with the idea of Wilayat al-Faqih. You have Sayyid Muhammad Shirazi as well, had a theory with regards to like Shura al-Fuqaha, a council of jurists, and all of these kind of ideas and theories, you see them, obviously they're all valid jurisprudential opinions, but the influences for them are a lot of the time based on what seems to be working, what looks like it's working, right? And that would be what the scholars would kind of go towards, with obviously the most successful of them to date, as we see the system in Iran, of course, with Sayyid al-Khomeini actually actualizing what was before just in books into an actual system of Wilayat al-Faqih. Yeah. So and I think that with Wilayat al-Faqih, if we can quickly gloss over it, it is representative in the sense that the social and socio-political issues are what are most kind of fixated upon. You'll never see that the faqih is trying to overstep with regards to matters of fiqh that are difference of opinion, like in his own in his own jurisdiction, obviously for his own followers, right? He'll give them a risala amaliya or whatever, but with regards to those things that are spoken about in public, those things that are enforced, they're all very much social, right? For example, the issue of hijab, right, in Iran, which is obviously a long discussion in itself, right? But the way that it's enforced, right? He has a vision. He understands that this matter, this understanding of hijab, or this concept of hijab, if it goes a certain way, this is how it's going to affect the Islamic government. If it goes this way, this is how it's going to affect it. And based on that judgment, and in the riwayat, it's called ta'zir, right? And this is kind of authority that faqih has to be able to make judgment at that time to say what needs to be done with regards to hijab. Because obviously we look at like some of the narrations and stuff, we're never going to find necessarily a punishment for not wearing hijab or these kinds of things, but these are implemented because the faqih sees it as necessary at that specific time to do it a specific way. There'll
always be different theories that are posed, whether it's from the fuqaha or whether it's from the layman. But I think just kind of wrapping up, because we're getting towards the end, it's important. It's important for us, like we said at the beginning of the conversation, at this juncture where we live in like the most like scary of times in many ways. I think many of us feel today that we are one step closer to the Holy Imam than we were 9 months ago. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I definitely feel that. And I feel like we're all thinking about when is it? When is it? When is it? When is it? And with that, there has to be a conscious inclusion of the Holy Imam in every conversation. And that includes conversational politics. Apathy amongst Muslim communities is rampant. Like, you know, in the UK, I know we're kind of on different spectrums, bro. You're putting out the mad hadith and going through the full Islamic history. And I'm very much like engaged and very, very focused on the
Labour Party.
No, not even, bro. That's a whole nother conversation. But no, like just in the UK, for example, the lowest engaged community out of any socioeconomic group is the Muslim community in London. Why? Like, how are we those who inherited the religion of the Holy Prophet? It does not make sense. Like, we should be engaged. We should not even be voting. And when I say voting, I mean voting for a candidate if there is one who is worthy of your vote, right? Because that's a very important point. But not just voting, but engaging with the political system. I don't mean running for office, but engaging with the political system that we live in today. That could be through pressure groups. It could be through, obviously, we see all the time on WhatsApp, petitions.
We have a say, you have some influence.
Yeah, campaigns, protests, just public awareness of moral enforcement, of goodness, which is what we don't have. And I feel like we need to disrupt society to the point where we enforce goodness. And that is through the inheritance of the Ahlulbayt and what they put forward. Do you see what I mean? And of course, what we see, the guidance and the wisdom that we gain from our fuqaha, because that's so important.
You know, early on, early on, I told you I'm happy living here in the UK. I was talking from the perspective of, for example, practicing my faith.
Yeah, of course.
And especially in particular, Shia beliefs and Shia and Sha'a'ir or whatever.
You go out, you wear dhul faqar, you play your basim in the car, no one's going to say anything.
But I don't think it's a society I'm happy with. Because the journey is not. And today was one example. Today I had the opportunity to pick my girls from school, after school. And I took them to the playground. It was a nice sunny day. I took them to the playground before I went home. And there came a moment where I was like, yalla, we need to leave the park. Why?
Yeah.
There was a bunch of, this is what's surprising, and it's going to be interesting, this conversation. There was a group, there were a bunch of females. I think 80% were hijabis. They were swearing, the F word, the B, all the words you can imagine. They were spitting, one of them is smoking. Yeah, I was shocked. I was like, girls, let's go I took them to another park. So I took them to another playground. I went there, now I saw another group of young boys, all Muslim, I can tell they're Muslim, smoking the weed, playing the silly music and just swearing at each other. Let's go home. It's not a society I want to be in. And when you're in an Islamic society, a true Islamic society, and we yearn for this, inshallah, to be in that state one day where you are comfortable to go out of your home with your children and have a safe environment where you know morality is not going to corrupt anyone's mind. And I think, you use the example of hijab being enforced in Iran or something, for example. The reason they use is that, they're trying to stop society from becoming immoral, for example. 100%. I see that point. I'm not saying I agree with it, I disagree with it. The scholars can discuss this, it's not for me. But I see that point. And one example was why we witnessed here today. Yeah. And if we are having Muslims acting in a certain way in the freedoms that we have in this country,
I agree.
What's left of Islam? At least I know someone who can rule under the laws and the sharia of Allah, the sunnah of Rasulullah, the teachings of the Ahlulbayt alayhim salam. At least that's something that will help us. Sahih?
100%.
I'm not saying, let's use Iran here, I'm not saying they're the best version of an Islamic government, but what's the alternative?
It's the best we've got.
What's the alternative? I'll be very honest, we can have jurists and scholars, they can disagree with opinions, how things are governed, how things are run. Everyone has an opinion at the end of the day. Yeah. What's the alternative?
Yeah, I think I just want to echo what Ahmed was saying, that, I think we all feel closer to now the time of the Imam. And it's important that we do get involved in even these discussions at the very least. If not having to vote for a candidate that we may not deem worthy of being voted. But I think this is a great time, by the way, to shout out Jumah Nights, because we had
your presence.
Plug your own self.
we did
You here's the shout out.
We did 2 episodes. We did 3 episodes, in fact, on the dhuhr of the Imam of our time. We spoke about the importance of our actions prior to the dhuhr and how they actually affect his dhuhr. Our actions right now will affect how the dhuhr plays out. We had the second episode as well with regards to 3 signs about Imam Mahdi, right? Talking about the Yamani, Khurasani and the Sufyani. All of those are very important discussions, because the closer we get to them, the more we need to be informed about what is in the narration so that we can recognize them as they come.
There was a point where you spoke about fake scholars as well, right?
Yeah, that was the third episode. That was the third episode. So that's false scholars.
I don't know if you heard last week's episode yet.
I haven't.
We referenced
you mentioned it, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, Sayyid Ali did mainly.
Yeah, of course.
Ahmed did on my behalf.
Yeah. So yeah.
Well, thank you, bro. Thanks for coming on. Obviously, it goes without saying that you are like you should be sitting here instead of us, bro, on a weekly
Ali for
basis.
Supreme Leader.
Shout out.
We all do our jobs, man.
No, long live Mo Ali. And guys at home, if you agree with me, comment. Please, below, comment Muhammad Ali to come back, inshallah. And also, if you think Muhammad Ali should be, because I feel like he should be a more frequent, I don't even want to say guest, but co-host on After Maghrib, then let us know, because we're trying to get him
triple trouble.
Inshallah. Sign the dotted line. Thank you guys. I definitely learned a lot. I hope you guys at home don't take any of what we said to heart, because obviously ultimately this is all our own opinion. And beyond that as well, like I said at the beginning, we're not experts in political theory, we're not experts in fiqh. When we talk about the fuqaha, we're not experts in Islamic history, nor are we philosophers or anything like that. So don't take what we say as gospel,
but the same
nor
as
take
you.
it to heart.
Same as you, honestly.
So
I'm saying we're the same as them.
Yeah. But rather, I think what we want to do is,
and perhaps, trust me, we're having the same conversations as them.
Yeah.
Just that we have cameras and microphones.
100%.
That's all.
Yeah,
because these are discussions that we would have amongst friends, and 100%. So it's only right to try and have them on the podcast.
No, you're right.
And it's representative of the discussions that we should be having as well, because they're important conversations.
Yeah, someone mentioned to me last week. He was like, good friend of mine, of all of ours actually. He was like, scratch the surface of topics that you think the community needs to have, and bring the information that you think the community needs to engage in or research on, and then let the community do 100%. The work. So that's really important for us to do.
Also, bringing the culture of Ahlulbayt is so important. You mentioned as well communists and capital. I was speaking to one of my friends earlier. Communists on social media, when they speak about like their leaders, they speak about Mao. They'll say Mao said. Right? And that's like an authority to them. It's like Mao said. The other guy will be like, really? Mao said that? It's like, oh, it's true now, right? We don't give that level of respect and 100%. Like actually going towards the Quran and the Ahlulbayt to find our complete solution. We need to give like the Ahlulbayt that same level of respect, at the very least, that the communists give Lenin and Mao.
100%. The gravitas that they give to their leaders.
100%.
And we think that, bro, are they the God-chosen hujjah, or do we have them? You know what I'm saying? So, 100%. Guys, let us know what you think in the comments. Hopefully you found it interesting. Said?
I just want to say I decided to speak less on this occasion.
No.
Because I learned so much.
Words of wisdom.
Trust me, like these are hadiths I bring in, the ayat from the Quran, and then the explanation of the example of how we see Iran today, for example, how it can work for us as a Shia in the Shia world. These are all things I can learn from.
Alhamdulillah, likewise.
And there is so much things I want to share here, but it does not benefit the listeners or the viewers. So I'll keep that to myself and I'll share it with you after the podcast.
Inshallah. I'm just going to say something last on your behalf, if you don't mind. Guys, JN is cooking right now. We're going to be back soon. We're brewing something really special for you. When I say JN, I mean Jumah Nights. So you will see Muhammad Ali soon again. Inshallah. We've got something cool in the pipeline for everyone at home, but we're just working on it before we bring it to you, present it to you. Inshallah. We will see you next week.
Inshallah.
Take care, guys. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.